Hi, welcome back to Nuance Needed, and welcome to Pep Talks with Sam. Believe it or not, we are in December, which is insane. And I know, I'm sure you have been saying that all of November. How did we get to November? And then I'm sure in October, you were like, how did we get to October? All the way back to January of this year, saying, how did we get to January of 2025? It is unhinged, really, if you sit and try to process time too much. But here we are in the last month of the year. And something that I have been thinking about a lot myself is, what has this year even meant? And obviously there's a lot I could talk about with my own life and changes that have happened. And I think there's a lot we could do to process the macro experience that we've all been through this year, especially for those of us that live in the United States. It's been a lot, just doesn't even begin to cover it. Overwhelming, monumental, paradigm shifting, those start to feel a lot more accurate. However, with all of that said, your year was unique to you. And I know that sounds like I don't even know what word to use, kind of a milquetoast phrase to put, kind of a stereotypical therapy, blah, blah, blah. However, it is very true. And I think the collective stress has impacted each of us differently. We all find ourselves in different life circumstances, different situations, different stressors, different everything. And so I wanted to give a little insight for how you could kind of do an inventory of your own life and figure out what this year has meant to you. Because I think something that I notice a lot, and I do this personally as well, but something that I notice from my clients a lot is there is a lot of groupthink. Even when we try to be aware of it, even when we try to say, oh, I don't think the way everybody else does, the way society is structured now around social media, around 24/7, psychologically 25/8 news drips, we actually end up pulling from a lot of collective experience to assume that because the collective at large has experienced something, we individually have experienced something. And I think in some situations, yes, that's true. But also, it's okay to say that maybe you weren't impacted by something else in the same way someone was, or that this thing actually impacted you far more than someone else in your life. And I think to be able to suss out that nuance for your own life allows you to feel more authentic in how you process the year. And something that I get a lot too is when it seems that the collective is going through something, I find with some of my clients, there's a lot of tension around maybe they weren't impacted by that thing, or they weren't as bothered, or they weren't as upset, or didn't have the same response as other people. And I want to give you permission that, and I've said this a million times and I'm going to say it again right now, the onslaught of information that we are getting every day, it is humanly impossible for any individual to appropriately process and contemplate all of it. And because of the unique circumstances of your life, there are going to be things that you relate to and things that you don't. And that is okay. And I think a lot of social media commentary would say the opposite, that you have to be aware of everything. You have to know of everything. You have to care the same way everybody does. And you can't. It's not possible. It is okay that there were things that you went through this year that you noted and things that you didn't. And with all of that said, when we talk about processing, I want you to get hyper specific on what has this year meant to you. What went really well? What went well in ways that surprised you? What were you surprised didn't impact you or upset you the way it did other people? What impacted you in ways that you weren't expecting? What was particularly challenging for you and your life and your loved ones this year? Not the larger narrative of what everybody else says was challenging for them, but what was challenging for you? And what did you learn about yourself in this year? I think that in and of itself is the key. If you're wanting to step into 2026 feeling maybe a little more grounded, a little more aware, you have to start with these more reflective questions of looking at all of it. I think sometimes with New Year's content, and I have more stuff that I'll be talking about in different videos, but when it comes to reflecting on the previous year and thinking of what we want for the next year, there's kind of an obsession in either direction, which means people are either telling you, you need to think of, the positive, you need to be happy, you need to be, what are you grateful for? What are you happy about? Blah, blah, blah. Or in the reverse of like, what went so horrible? What did you just think was going to ruin you? And neither of those questions are inherently wrong. The issue is they ignore the fact that a million truths can be true at the same time. Multiple realities exist at the same time. It's not that they can, it's that they do. And I think there's a lot of tension when we try to nail ourselves in a particular box, when we try to say, oh, this year was actually really good, or this year was actually really bad, because your year was filled with 365 individual and separate days. And you could have gone through something really hard the one day and actually felt decent the next day. Or you could have had a horrific week, but then the next week actually felt surprisingly manageable. And that is okay. You are not doing something inherently wrong because of those fluctuations. Those are human. That's the human experience, is fluctuation and change and shift, because it is impossible to stay in any emotive state constantly. Whether it's really sad, whether it's really happy, it doesn't matter. You cannot remain in one specific emotive state in perpetuity. And so as you start to maybe kind of wind down into the year and you're starting to be reflective of things, allow yourself to sit in that complexity. Allow yourself to think of, what has this year meant for me? And to not be so concerned with everybody else's input. And I'm phrasing this way because this is something that I'm working on myself. I'm trying really hard to separate myself from larger discourse about what things should be or shouldn't be, or what is upsetting or what isn't, or pop culture references or trends or what have you. I'm trying to remove myself and decide what actually resonates with me. What do I care about? What matters to me? What do I want to participate in? What do I not care to participate in? And the silliest example of all is The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives for me. I started watching it. A lot of people were reaching out to me and wanting my thoughts, and it was all happening at the same time. Everybody was, commenting on it when the show dropped. And I felt too overwhelmed. I watched the first 2 episodes. I was having a much stronger reaction than I anticipated. And it was stressing me out to watch these dynamics. And I didn't do it. I didn't give my immediate thoughts. I didn't share my immediate opinion because it felt like too much. And frankly, I didn't care. And I knew people were wanting my thoughts or my insights because of, I'm not saying like I have anything particularly groundbreaking to say, but because of my experience with the church, people were asking like, what did I think about this? What did I think about that? Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I can't do that right now. I can't. I'm going to be behind. I'm not going to be in all the conversations. I'm not going to know all the ins and outs, and I'm going to be okay with that. And now I'm in a place where I'm able to pick it back up, and I will watch it. But I allowed myself that space to not care. And of course, that is a very silly, frivolous example, but you are allowed to do the same thing with anything that you feel you need to in your life. If you need distance from something, if you need to be more close and involved in something, that is your call. And trust yourself, practice trusting yourself to know that practice trusting yourself that you know what it is that you need, whether it is that you need to be more distant or more close with something, or if something resonates or it doesn't, or if you actually do care about something and it kind of surprises you, or you don't care and it surprises you. To allow your life to exist in incredible shades of gray, just almost overwhelming amounts of gray. That is okay. You are not doing it wrong because of that. If anything, allowing yourself to have a little bit more control over what does get a reaction from you, over what does matter to you, allowing yourself to be selective of those things, is you prioritizing your emotional energy, because it is finite. What we have to give is finite. And you are able to give more to less when you get super specific and be honest with yourself about what you want to be giving your energy to. And so as you process this year, allow yourself to look back on those things. What did you get from this? What has been your experience? What was your unique experience? What did you relate to? What didn't you? What made you feel empowered? What made you feel disempowered? What were you excited about? What devastated you? Allow yourself to go there and practice sitting in that space. Because so many people will say to me like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, well, I just have to do it. And they're like, I totally hear you, but how do I do that? And I'm like, you just have to do it. You have to do it. You have to practice looking at both and not using one to discount the other. And I think that's the tricky element for some people is they get caught up in like, well, if I think this, I couldn't possibly think that. And it's like, no. I think an extreme example of this would be grief. The biggest feeling that most people experience within grief is some level of relief, depending on the situation, obviously. But that is the most controversial emotion that a lot of people experience when they're processing their grief is because they're like, I shouldn't feel this way. Why do I feel this way? I don't want to feel this way. And it's like, well, you do. Because for your unique situation, for your life, there is an element of relief. Either that this person isn't in pain anymore, either that you're no longer having to be a caregiver, that you feel relieved about not having to worry about them, right? Like that's okay. Again, an extreme example, but that gray is there. The sadness and the relief exist at the same time. And so as we're being reflective of this year, the year is winding down, let yourself be nuanced about it. This isn't even me trying to be on brand. This is just like a legitimate principle that I want to drive home to you. So I hope that you are enjoying your holiday season as much as you can. I hope that you are trying to get rest in. I hope that you are prioritizing you and your needs and what you want this season to mean to you. And I leave that with you for now. And I will see you next time.